Showing through detail and description. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. This is a quote from the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov. Chekhov died over 100 years ago, but he's still regarded as one of the world's greatest short story writers. When I write "show me" on one of your papers, sometimes I find that students don't quite know what I mean or they struggle to understand. I'm not necessarily asking you to describe an entire scene. I'm asking you to engage the reader in a way that allows them to experience what you have experienced. That is key to good writing. We want the reader to experience what the writer has experienced. So let's look at this quotation a little bit closer because I think that it has a lot to say, a lot to help us, a lot that can help us with this concept. To say that something is shining is vague. What does shining mean? When you hear the moon is shining, you might have an idea of a moon, and yeah, it might be bright or something like that. But we've heard the word shine so many times that it could mean virtually anything. It gives us nothing for our imaginations to hold on to. It's not compelling, it's not engaging. But when I say the glint of light on broken glass, that's more specific. I immediately get an image in my head when I think of that, when I read those words. It gives us something to look at. This is creating an image. This is what I mean when I talk about imagery or I'm creating something for your imagination. Let's look at a couple more examples. I actually took these examples from a blog and I've put the URL at the bottom in case you want to check it out. So the first one, telling or informing. The temperature had fallen overnight and the heavy frost reflected the sun's rays brightly. Okay, well, the author here is telling you that the temperature has fallen, and they're telling you that the frost was reflecting the sun's rays brightly. When I see an adverb, I always think that adverb is telling me. It is telling me that the rays are bright. It's not showing me that the rays are bright. It's telling me. So here's a better description. The morning air was bitter ice in her nose and mouth, and dazzling frost lay on every bud and branch. Do you see how this quotation gives us much more to imagine? So temperature had fallen. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't give me something that I can imagine in my head. It's vague. It's vague like that first half of the last quotation. Let's look at one more example. The taller man was a carpenter, complete with the tools of his trade. Okay, so we know that the man is tall, or at least he's taller than someone else. We know that he's a carpenter, and we know that he's got some sort of tools somewhere. The tools might be vague. Maybe we imagine a hammer. I don't know. What kind of tools does a carpenter have? Yeah, I immediately think of a hammer, I guess. Now let's look at this next example of showing. A saw and hammer dangled from his belt, and an adze was hooked onto it. One thumbnail was black, and when he bowed, she saw several long wood shavings caught in his curly hair. Now we have an image of a carpenter. This doesn't even tell us that he's a carpenter, but we can see someone who has these tools, who has a thumbnail that's been hit probably with a hammer, and this individual has wood shavings in their hair. So we see a lot more of the character, and we can imagine that person much more vividly than in the other example. So, one of the things that we want to avoid when we're trying to show scene or when we're trying to show an image or to describe something is vague um, adjectives. Um, Also, adverbs generally, although I mean, sometimes they have a place. But let's look at an example of a word that's been overused. Now, I might want to write that something smells beautiful. But the problem is that the word beautiful conveys nothing more than a vague impression. And this is the case because it's been so overused. We say, that's beautiful. Now think about it for a second. When we speak, we have our voice. We have uh, our nonverbal cues that we're using. And so we are communicating. Maybe I'm standing in a garden with a neighbor, and the neighbor is showing me her lilacs, and I can smell the smell of the lilacs in the air, and I say, that smells beautiful. I don't need to come up with some sort of imagery about lilacs because that person that I'm communicating to is right there. They know exactly what I'm smelling because they're smelling it too. They uh, can see the expression on my face, they can hear the expression in my voice. Maybe I'm doing something with my arms. There's all this communicating going on. When you are writing, it's a different beast. All you have is your words. So it's very different than spoken language. As a writer, I must show you my experience through the words on the page. To write that the lilac smelled beautiful means nothing to someone who has never smelled a lilac blossom. So, how should I handle that kind of a situation? Well, does the lilac smell remind you of another smell? For example, the blossom scent skipped through my nostrils like a breeze dancing over a hillside meadow. Maybe a little bit over the top, but you get the idea, I think. I am comparing one thing to another. Maybe I can create a metaphor or simile. The lilac blossom smelled like the innocent sunlight of early morning. What if the lilac evokes a memory? It smelled just like the perfume my grandmother dabbed on her wrists when she was dressing for the opera. Now, this is all going to be very situational. Perhaps the first description works perfectly for that text. If I was writing a memoir piece and I had been writing about my grandmother recently, in the memoir, I might use the last one. So a lot of this is situational, what's appropriate for the particular piece.